Hello everyone, this is the Spedix IS100 flight tower flight stack, and I wanted to bring this to your attention. I mentioned it in, I think, my last video, because this is a nice alternative at $59 to our HGLRC stacks, which I've been using for quite a while and had good success. Now, if you're into soft mounting, it does limit your ability to soft mount. You can see where HGLRC themselves use soft mounting on the bottom, but they didn't use any soft mounting on the top, so I'm not sure how effective doing these rings down here like this is, but that is an option in a build that I will not be showing you just yet. I did do soft mounting on the bottom and then on the very top. I don't know what impact that has, but it's always hard to tell, because unless you have two machines you built identically, and you know your thoughts on the hardware is that it's identical too, then you can start to tell the difference. But otherwise it's largely speculation on whether the soft mounting works or not in that particular case. Now, in general, soft mounting is going to work to some degree. What degree, that's hard to determine. Many people are great fans of soft mounting and they just buy everything so they can soft mount. If you're looking for soft mounting, I would suggest the Maytech 411 F4 flight controller. It's got an M3 hole. I think it's an M4 hole with a built-in gummy, and that will allow you to easily mount that flight controller with soft mounting, versus most of these others don't have that. But this also uses pins, and that's why it's comparable to the other. It's a little bit different on feature set, because the VTX only goes up to 100 milliwatt, whereas the HGLRC F428 flight stack, I think, does go up to 350 milliwatts. So that's something you have to be aware of. And this one does have a bit of setup that you have to do with jumpering some pads, and I wanted to draw your attention to those things. But let's pull them apart and just take a closer look. Try to be careful not to loosen my pins here. I don't want to break it before I get to use it, at least, right? The pins are quite solid. It does come in the box, all just kind of tucked together. And as I said, it's $59, and the HGLR flight stacks can, if you get the 428, I think it typically comes in around $80. King Kong or LDRC also has a flight stack, but I think I picked up one of those when it was on super sale for like $69. So as you can see in the little baggie, you've got your nylon hardware, you've got all your different connectors, and you've got a battery lead in here. So that's kind of nice. Oh, I forgot the capacitor is a 25 volt. Is it 150 microfarad? Yeah. So it's a little tiny capacitor. Put my finger behind it so you can see how small it is. It's one of the smaller ones I've seen. It does come with a fairly good instruction sheet, but unfortunately this instruction sheet seems to be for an initial iteration and not the current model. At least the last two that I've looked at, I haven't found things to line up quite as they have on the instruction sheet, and that's a little bit problematic. For the most part, the flight controller's fine. Let's orient this the same way so that you can, let's see, USB over here, just like it's got there. So you can see where you've got the video. So if you didn't have the VTX, you could use the pads on the side to wire in a VTX of your own choosing. And then you've got the camera, which can use the plugs. I believe also on the bottom, yes, we have additional pads in the camera. You can see the traces if I get the angle just right. And that's relatively rare. I don't know, an electronics engineer would have to say whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I don't actually know. What else? We've got a buzzer connector down here at the back, and then we've got our LED over here, and then on this side is our receiver. And then we determine our receiver voltage, like if you're wanting to run DSM and you have a Spectrum satellite you're connecting it to, so you need 3.3 volt, you have to flip it over and you have a voltage selector that you need to jumper. Let's take a look at that. Let me get my pointer here. It's going to be really hard to see. Let's get it right. So the middle pad is what we always select, and then if you want 5 volts, you would just have a little solder come over here this way, or if you wanted 3.3, have it come over this way. And then also, in order to get this to work for your receiver, you've got to add a little solder between the middle pad and the RX1, which is right over here. And it doesn't really show you that necessarily over here. See how it has the UARTs? Voltage selection for the camera as well. So let's look at that for the voltage selection of the camera. So we've got the middle, we've got these 3 pads here. I sure hope you can see this. And this one over here just says BAT, so I'm going to presume that that's voltage from battery, so VBAT. So if you're wanting to, if you've got this VTX, it's a 5 volt VTX, then you need to add your solder on here between the 5 volt and the middle pad. And then you can also see we've got some other pads for RX6, TX6. Again, we've got VBAT, the middle pad, 5 volt, and then we've got TX3 and RX3 as well. What's the one here? I forget. Oh, this is the voltage selection for the camera. So again, you could do VBAT if you wanted to, and so you would in the smaller pad. It's hopefully it comes through in camera. I don't know if I've got the angle just right to where you can see these pads in the silk screening, but the middle pad is generally the same. It's not the same size as the two pads to either side. It's a little bit smaller, and then you can just go over that. This is for the VTX. Set that to 5 volts if you're using this one. Then if you're not using that one, then you have to determine that yourself. And then for your receiver or the camera, you can choose either in the case of most CCD cameras, but be careful, make sure you're looking at the specifications for that. You can see the pins and how they line up here. Get a good look at the board. This is a little cockeyed, but not bad. I have plugged this board in, and it appears to work. That's something else that I wanted to cover about this board. It's odd, but if you have the VTX, this doesn't always happen. I should just say it's odd. If you've got the VTX and you've got it plugged in and you plug into USB power, it will power the VTX. It will also power your receiver, your LEDs, your buzzer, and all the other things get power to it. But the one thing I noticed with the VTX, and especially generally when I have a stack like this, I wire the camera for power to the VTX, so I get a secondary line of regulation or line filtering. If it has it, or if it doesn't, at the very least, if the flight controller has it and it gives up the ghost, like in the video that we may be seeing coming up, we have a secondary option for cleaning up that video with the voltage regulator on the VTX. So I tend to get power and ground from the VTX, and then I get my OSD through the camera port. And you just do that through depending the connectors that do come with the package. So you can power this thing via USB, and you can bind your machine up, you can set your modes, you can test your LEDs, you can test your beeper. You can also test to make sure your camera and OSD works, but you'll notice that it'll flicker or be kind of fuzzy, and that's probably because it can't get as much power as it needs, because when you plug in a battery, then the video gets crystal clear. So if you see that the video kind of comes and goes when you've just got it plugged into USB, it's because it's not quite getting enough power. And that could vary from computer to computer. I'm using a powered USB hub off screen, and that's how I power my USB cables. I think it's most reliable that way. That way I'm not depending upon the port on my computer. One other thing I don't care for, you can see the arrow that we have that indicates the front of the machine points up that way, and I have seen this completely rotated around. I think they're using either this or the F3 version of this on many of our ready-to-flies. I have seen it in 2 different instances and stuff I've got here at home, to where this board seems to be used. Sometimes they use it with a flight controller that doesn't have pins, so the board will actually have a connector for all the motor power and signal. And sometimes they'll use this as well as part of the stack. But the antenna, unfortunately, doesn't end up... Let me put this all back together for you so we can make this abundantly clear. Always be careful, make sure you're lining your pins up right. Don't want to bend a pin or knock something loose before we get a chance to crash it. So where did our little... So this is the battery lead. So this, let's say this is the back of our vehicle. You're going to line it up traditionally, and you're going to go to the back of the vehicle. So you can see right away that, oh, I don't see, look at that. I didn't do it right on camera. I didn't do it right. I've got one pin sticking out. Hopefully I didn't damage that. You have some space to work here if you want to do your motor wires with the stack all in place. Otherwise, I'd recommend placing the ESC and then connecting the motor wires. So typically you would have your battery leads coming right off the back and going out the back of your machine to connect to your battery. That means your antenna's out in the front, so now you have all this antenna length that you either lose, that you don't get to use for mounting purposes and getting it outside the carbon fiber frame, or you have to desolder this and get a longer antenna in order to overcome that. Or you can rotate the whole board. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. You can rotate the whole board this way, and then the antenna does come out the back. And this is what I've seen in the RTFs. But of course, you probably have to do some motor mapping, because now your motor positions have changed because you've rotated the ESC. And then when you bring your lead in from the battery, you're going to need to go from the bottom, probably around these, and to the back. and you may find that that gives you a little bit of fits when you try to get your battery strapped through there if you're using a bottom mounted battery. But it's all very viable. If you want to put this towards the back, you can rotate the board. You're going 180 degrees on the yaw. I think it's negative in beta flight, so you have to make sure you do that, or your machine will freak out when you arm it with props on. It'll probably freak out a little bit even without props. So you've got some different options, and the only reason why I wanted to bring this up was you have a little bit of configuration and work you have to do. Right out of the box, it does not work just like the HGLRC stacks do. So we've got to solder those jumper points to make sure we've got everything selected properly. We've got an antenna that could possibly be a little bit of a problem and get it out of place. It's only $20 to $25 less than the HGLRC stacks, and it only goes up to 100 milliwatt versus the HGLRC stacks tend to go up to 350 milliwatts. So these are all things you should weigh. I've got 3 of these. This one obviously is not on a machine. I've got 2 others on machine, and I've got 2 or 3 others that look like just like this, but they're F3 versions that came on ready-to-fly machines. So I think that they might be using them. But you could pick these up, the Spedix, I believe that's IS100 Fly Tower. You could pick these up from Pyroflip, Race Day Quads, Airblade UAV. There's probably a number of different shops where you can pick this up. I didn't find this on Amazon, oddly enough, though. If you're in another country, I would just search for Spedix IS100, and if I find this on Amazon, because I may have been searching with 2 E's, you know, the natural spelling of speed, maybe it's Spedix. I may have been searching wrong because I probably used 2 E's, Spedix, because I've been saying Spedix even though it's Spedix, I think. 1 E, Spedix. But it's a good option if you want to save a little bit of money and you want to give something else a try. Maybe you haven't had good luck with the HGLRC stacks. Like I said, I've built a number of the HGLRC stacks, and I've only had one that's given me fits, and I don't think that was a problem because it actually started happening after a crash. So that's a little bit on us, you know. If we crash these things, then, you know, all bets are off. Even if it's the light crash, I still think, you know, unless you're a perfect pilot and you never crash, we have to accept our failures and we have to open up our wallets, and that's one of the reasons why this hobby is so expensive. So take a look, see what you can find, see if your local hobby shop happens to carry these if you want to give them a try. I'll link down below a couple of places that I've purchased them from. If I can find them on Amazon, I'll link them down there as well. Amazon's a place I like to buy stuff because of the fast shipping, because rarely am I as prepared as I need to be for a build. But this so far, in the 2 machines I've got this working in and running, I haven't flown them extensively, but I've flown probably 25 to 45 packs through each of them. It does work pretty well. I haven't had any true problems with tuning or flight characteristics. So I think very likely it's going to be a good competitor to the HGLRC stack, and maybe something that you want to consider picking up. Oh, I didn't cover how I get power off the VTX. That's right up here. It's pretty simple. You've got 2 5-volt pads here, and you've got the ground here in the middle, so you can just pick one. This one over here is for your video. I get that out of the flight controller because I want to see the OSD. If you didn't want the OSD, you would just get your video right here, and you'd be all set to go. Alright, if you have any comments or questions about this little guy, please leave that in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.